Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Phil Svitek, joined alongside Marisa Serafini. And this is our very first show for this. It is not our very first show ever together. Marisa and I have hosted many things. Just to summarize it very quickly, we are people who love movies, we love creating content and art, and we love books. And so we've done a lot of shows about movies and we've done a lot of shows about books. And now we're finally back and talking about books. And as the title of this episode implies, we are going to be talking about The Poppy War by Rebecca F. Kuang. And yeah, we'll dig into it. We'll give you some background info about how it all came to be, what the book's about, kind of do some non-spoilery stuff. But then, like any other sort of book club, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty fairly fast. And so we invite you, if you haven't read the book, to read it and then join us. At the end of the episode, we'll also let you know what book we're going to be reading next month. And we're going to, essentially continue this book club trained digitally. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And, we want to start a community and as much as like anybody else in the online space. So if there's stuff that you think we should be reading, let us know. But obviously, we encourage your participation for what we're reading as well. So, but without further ado, Marisa, I will allow you to introduce yourself and give some quick thoughts on Poppy War.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Marisa Serafini, like Phil said, and not to repeat everything he just reiterated. But love reading, and I was like, you know what? We should start doing our book discussions yet again. And of course, as one would, I had my reading list and you had yours, and you suggested The Poppy War. I have actually never heard of it. Got it the very next day, and I was like, all right, let's go into it. Reading it, very easy to read, despite it being a fairly lengthy book, but it's very, it flowed very well. It was easy to understand. It was from a young woman's perspective, which I personally connected to. And I liked seeing the journey. When you read the book, it's literally split into 3 different acts. So if for whatever reason in the future, someone wants to adapt this into a movie, I'd be all for it. I really enjoyed this book.
Well, I have a new rule. I think books should be adapted as TV shows.
Yeah. More time to
yeah.
Out.
Yeah.
And breathe and build the world of the books. I can see
absolutely. Now that said, yes. So for me, just a little bit of background, I've been trying to expand into new authors, authors that aren't just white men in general and the classics, just more stuff that can be regarded as good. And this came as a great sci-fi book, and I was like, all right, let me check it out. This seems fun. Now, I knew it was part of a trilogy, and, I have not read the rest of the books. Marisa, you haven't either. So we're only going to be talking about this as a standalone piece in and of itself. But yeah, like you, I enjoyed it. I thought, it's about 500 pages, give or take, but you don't really notice it. Like you're just flowing through it. It's very easy, engaging writing, and I certainly appreciated that. And I believe right now she's only 25, which is incredible to me.
Amazing.
To have that, like when we talk about like she's a trilogy, she has finished the trilogy. The trilogy is done. There's the Poppy War, the Dragon Republic, and then the Burning God. Yeah. So you can now go finish the whole trilogy and know what happens. But that's insane. Like basically a book a year. That's some high velocity output.
Right, and I believe there's an in-between kind of book as well that's kind of like a companion, The Drowning Faith, which is from Nez's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to keep delving into the world and get a different perspective than Rin's main perspective, you can also read that one as well.
Yeah, and the book itself, so while it is a fantasy book, it is heavily influenced on A, her upbringing, B, her studies, right? So she studies Chinese history and, politics and philosophy and stuff like that. And, I think it's definitely evidenced through the book, right? I mean, you and I are certainly not scholars of this, but you can kind of get a sense of who US was, who Japan was, and who China was, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can understand the influences of past wars and just how people view each other from different provinces and their upbringing, like the whole class and caste system. It is definitely evident in this book. And I love how this book points out all those discriminations and prejudices that people have against each other, but when you keep fighting and overcome and stuff, at the end of the day, people do still come together despite all that. And I think this book really shows that very well.
Yeah. And the other aspect that I appreciated too was it doesn't mince about it in terms of like there's basically not really a good side, right? There's not even necessarily technically a good character. Like everyone just plays in such gray areas. And I appreciate that about it because I didn't want it to just be like pro China, pro Japan, or pro US. Like, in the real world, all three have done good things and all three have done terrible things.
Yeah, right.
And I liked how the book wasn't afraid to go there. Like, that was a big plus for me.
Right. And the book also, I mean, not to get ahead and stuff, but we do see moments where different characters do snap judgments of other people, but also when the book also goes into a deeper explanation of why a person is the way that they are. This is how they were raised. This is what they went through. So you can't judge them for this. And like the decisions you just made, we have to question like why you made that compared to this. So it's like, it's not just one, it's not black and white in that sense. There's a lot of gray and there's a lot of reasoning and understanding behind people's decisions and the actions and all the consequences that they have to deal with afterwards.
Yeah. And, overall, like it starts off pretty simple where, for the most part, I thought, and this we'll start to get into the spoilery stuff at this point. So, handcuffs off. I thought it was going to be one of those things, like the movies that you see with the one, right? Where here's this character named Rin, and all of a sudden she possesses like this incredible power, right? And it's like, she's going to be the savior. And I thought it was going to be one of those. And what I appreciated was that it wasn't, for the simple fact, like even from the get-go, you understand that anything that's kind of come to her through life, she works insanely hard at, and for better or worse. And I appreciated that it wasn't just like, oh, you are the one, Harry or, Neo from the Matrix or whatever else, So
right. I no, sorry to cut you off, but no, I completely agree because this book definitely shows it doesn't matter where you come from, but like through hard work, perseverance, and dedication, it shows that someone's the work that you put into it, you actually can get the result, and the good things come out of it. And this is the journey of someone who definitely did not have the world handed to her. She was not born with a silver spoon up her ass. And she worked hard for everything. And so when you're watching her journey and her doing every single action and decision, you're rooting for her because you know where she came from.
Absolutely. And, that's why it's so gripping. I just want to jump to this part because it just makes sense in the moment. By the end, right, the point is for her to go call the Phoenix and the god. And she says basically like it's my destiny to do this. And the Phoenix like, no, you have no destiny. There's no destiny. It's you made all these choices. And I appreciate that aspect of it, that just it just goes so against the convention of all this stuff of what is your destiny and you're meant to do this. Like, no, you're not. And it is all just human choices. And because especially like throughout the book, it's all about like how, dangerous the gods can be. And I appreciate that, like, none of this has to do with the gods. It's all humans just doing shit to each other.
Right. And I definitely love that because near the end, when we had that conversation where there's like, no, always themselves. And then when they fail and there's war and destruction and all that at the end, then they blame someone else because they can't take responsibility for their actions. I was like, yeah, that rings true for everybody who has ever gone through war, or just personal suffering in and of itself, is where it's so bad that they can't reflect that, hey, maybe we were the issue and not someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a lot of characters throughout the book, and some come back and some don't. But what were the standout ones for you? Because there's definitely a lot.
Definitely Alton, because the way that they built him up in the first third of the book, the first act, so to speak, is that he was just this mysterious warrior who was so good, undefeatable. His reputation preceded him, that he was just the best fighter. No one could beat him. And after knowing all that, there's always that sense of wonder, like why? There's got to be a reason behind it. But then when you watch him come back as a commander now, and he's just different type of characteristic that you saw when they first built and established his character, and how he changes throughout the third act. He had a different, I don't want to say character arc, but it was definitely up and down with him. But his journey was very interesting, and I felt for him at the end. I really did feel for him. So he became a bigger character than I thought he was going to be.
I always felt like he was going to be a big character, but it is fascinating, right? It takes that notion of be careful of meeting your heroes and really puts at the forefront, because, yeah, he has so many good qualities, but then the closer Rin gets to him, the veneer is shattered, and you understand why and so forth, why he is the way that he is. And it is so tragic in all the ways. And yet, in spite of that, like, if anything, he was supposed to be the cautionary tale for Rin, and she didn't take it.
No, exactly. And while I was reading the book, I was like, okay, so Rin is just the female counterpart of him, basically. That she is Alton, but just in female form. And I gotta admit, maybe this is just the romantic side of me. I thought maybe at one point they might have gotten together. I was like, ooh, I could see them together. They definitely have a lot of commonalities when it came to them being spiritualities and just the power and being warriors in and of itself. But then I'm like, this is war. This would probably be messy if you throw romance also into the destruction and battles that they're currently fighting. I was like, romance is kind of not even a thing in this book, which I had to like quickly understand and accept. But seeing the relationship, it started off pretty simple, I guess, like more acquaintances. But as they got to know each other, as they got to work with each other, they, on some level, you can see there was a level of respect towards each other, despite their differences in how they approach the same thing.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, their love was deeper than just a romance. It was it was for a shared commonality that essentially their entire race was wiped out, and they're the last two people left, right? And I like how it does kind of grapple with that. I mean, there is that moment where Rin basically thinks to herself, like, is he going to kiss me? And he just basically hugged her and like kissed her on her forehead.
Right.
Which I thought, like, I appreciated that aspect of it, that it was all that.
I liked it because that was, yes, it was an intimate moment, but that you don't need a kiss to connect on a certain level. And I liked that because, especially after everything those two had just gone through, that finally came to a moment where they completely respected each other and trusted each other.
Yeah. One of the things that interestingly didn't come back, and maybe it will in the other books, I don't know, but because essentially Rin had, in order to get rid of her periods, right, she can't have kids. And so obviously in that sense, like, even if the notion of them getting together to continue the line of their heritage, that's off the table. And so it's fascinating how, not that I needed it to, I mean, there was so much the book was tackling with, but like you had that aspect of it that like, that she made that choice, and she made it a choice for Nikara, which then essentially were responsible for wiping her out, her people. So she had that to grapple with. And then also just, I do think there are aspects of it, like sex in general is obviously portrayed in a very way, certainly with essentially what is like the raping of Nanking, where there's that moment where it's described in pretty horrific detail of like this, rape and what one of her friends from the academy, I believe it's Venka, right?
What Venka went through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's terrible what the women are put through in this book. And being a woman, reading what the women are going through, it was like I felt for it as well, because the problem with Rin giving up her womb, that was a conscious choice. And I don't know if that, you guys can tell us, but that is a decision that she eventually faces and regrets in the second or third book. Maybe that it does come back. It didn't come back in this one, but maybe it does come back in the later books, that if she does want to start a family, she's going to regret that. And she's young. That was a very, very impulsive decision. And I was like, oh girl, that's going to kick you. And so we'll see. But the problem with that is, like, that was a conscious choice, and Venka's wasn't. She was tortured by horrific men. And so there's just like all these things that are happening to the women's body. It's just tragic in the ways that some are forced and some are not. And it's just, and I think it's just a casualty of, this is going to sound reductive too, but casualty of war, that happens. It's not just the Chinese culture, but just like how people are treated. They're not human anymore. They're just treated as things, and they're torn apart like things. And that's what they did to Venka. And yes, she was a terrible character when they were at the academy together. I think it's just common, females against females, alpha females, especially against alpha females. And not to say it is karma, but because no one deserves what Venka went through. But it's terrible that it took something tragic for those two to finally start seeing each other and start getting along.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a very gripping moment. And it's one of those, that's when, like, certainly Rin starts slipping into where she otherized basically the Federation, right? Where she no longer, because there's that point where in the seaport town they're fighting, and she's like, these people look like me. Or I think it might have been in Sinegard when the first like attack is happening. I forget exactly when, but she's like, these people look like me. In fact, I think she says, like, they look more like me than what my people are supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And so I found that fascinating. And then at that moment afterwards, the switch is basically flipped, and she is like, doesn't view the other people as humans, which leads to when she draws upon the Phoenix, there's that very specific passage of like children sleeping innocently in bed, and boom, just the fire erupts.
Right. And you can see throughout this book the conscious choices of losing one's humanity. You saw Rin give up her room. That was a conscious choice. You're seeing her accept the Phoenix's power. That was a choice. But like slowly with every decision, she's losing more and more of herself. And with every decision that she's affecting other people, she's starting, you can see her perspective on people changing from humans to non-humans to things, to like, you see this evolution of how she sees the world. And it's kind of like a downward spiral, and she's slowly losing herself, her humanity. And I don't want to say sociopath, but she's getting onto that point where she is devoid of human emotion. She is just a thing now.
Yeah, and it's like you said. I mean, it's a byproduct of the reality, because I mean, I think it's reflective of our world today. There's so many ways to just divide, right? Like even within Nikara, you have the 12 provinces, right? So then you have the 12 armies. But the abnormal people, they're in the psych because they're weird, and okay, but we need something to do with them, so they're there. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, there's guys, girls. Oh, and there's there's the people from the north, there's people from the south, obviously classism, and light skin, dark skin. So it's like it's just you're creating all these like things, and like you hope that there's like some small part of this like insane Venn diagram that like you find commonality. And of course, the point is that there's so much commonality, but yet we've created this entire division. And so, of course, like Rin is going to be a byproduct of this. And sadly, I want to talk about Jin. I hope that's how you say his name, her master, who is also the gatekeeper, correct? Like it's never explicitly stated, and yet it's like as close you can get to it without so I just wanted to like always.
Yes, no, there was a moment they're like, so it has been you this entire time. And we should have seen it, didn't see it coming, but we should have seen it. I liked him because yes, at first you can be frustrated with him because he's so vague in everything he does and everything he teaches Ren from the start. And she's just trying to understand the world of lore and the culture and the reason why she has these abilities. And he's not giving her clear answers. And then as she's starting to learn more and more and more, and then he's like, okay, now you understand. But it's like he gives some little things to understand on some level, but not the whole entire picture, which is very frustrating. But when you understand why he was so secretive, because he's the gatekeeper, like, oh, you were making sure that she's not going to destroy the world. So I understand the vagueness in that, but also it would have been so much easier if you were just clear and straight up from the beginning.
I think there's I think there's that aspect, but I also think, there's that side of it where people just within education always want the simple answer, and he didn't want to provide her with, he wanted her to know how to get the answer regardless, right? Like he was teaching her essentially how to fish instead of giving her a fish. And right. Certainly the aspect where it paid off was in the tournament, the first year tournament, where all of Jun's students were taught in the same exact manner, and she could just beat them because she knew exactly their technique and she knew a reversal essentially. Yeah. So
the counter act to it. And I actually, I got to say, I did enjoy reading that because I am a martial artist myself. I do train. So to see her and how she saw the world, even though she didn't have like proper quote unquote training, physical training, like all the others that have been like reared since birth and had all this, family ties to the militia and all that. I liked how it doesn't matter where you come from in family and genetics or what have you. It's like if you study and if you condition yourself, you can still be just as great as of a fighter, if not better. And I enjoyed that physical journey that we also, the writer also took us through. Like carrying a pig up a mountain every day. Who wants to do that? But it's things like that, the conditioning that really builds you as a warrior.
Yeah, and also, like with sports, it's a metaphor. I mean, fighting is a sport technically, so it's a metaphor for life, and so it just shows that, like, you need diversity of thought, right, in general as well, rather than just the sameness. So it advocates for that. And the other aspect of it that I, wasn't necessarily overt, but I did appreciate was this idea of Confucianism essentially is all about order and structure and, who's my commander and things like just being proper. And I did actually appreciate that aspect of it. But the problem, like what's interesting to me, Confucianism, the reason why the underpinning of that philosophy is for the moral good of, society, right? And unfortunately, when everyone's essentially corrupt, that's how I would categorize it by the end. You learn is everyone's just heinous. None of like following those sort of orders and regimented things really matter,
It didn't matter because I think it's just that school structure that we're all forced to deal with when we go to school. It's very institutionalized in that way. So I understand when you have like young teenagers just trying to learn, you have to have some structure. And it is, Sinegard was basically a military school. But like once you're actually out in the war, structure goes out the window. You can still have those foundations and stuff, but well, and I think there was a moment where I forget exactly who it was, but when she was finally put into psych and she was like starting to bond with her fellow comrades, they're like, forget everything you learned at school. It's not going to help you because this is war. Like at the end of the day, you don't need to, be on class at this time, or you don't have to think this way. So long as you fight and survive every day, that's all that matters.
I believe it was Kara who said it to her.
Yeah.
Because I think apart from Kara, everyone else was a guy, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So while we're on the subject, let's talk about, because she's one of the twins. Her brother Chagan. We don't see him for most of the novel, but then he comes back and he has that bond with Kara, and essentially he puts Rin in her place for the most part. They like throughout the entire book, they're going head to head. And it's interesting because at first he tells her follow at Alton, and then she does, and then obviously he disagrees with Alton, and the reverse happens. So they essentially switch. I found that fascinating.
And the thing with however you pronounce his name is Shagan. I kept reading it as Shagan. But like he comes in later into the book, but he's one of those characters who comes in and only says what he needs to say, but everything he says is important. It's like you cannot take his words with a grain of salt. Like he actually adds value to everything. And he was the one who always questioned Rin and always questioned Alton and put them in their spots when they needed to. He was the voice of reason for both of those two who kept, like, again, losing their humanity, and Shagan was the one who was keeping them in check. So like I appreciate what he added. And he helped Rin at the end of the day. He helped her see the vision and understand what exactly they were going through. And he was the one who revealed that they were taking the mountain pass. Like, so everything he said, he added something.
Yeah, and I like that she did grapple with that aspect, because she's like, your visions mean shit. It's only in hindsight that they actually have any value. And he's like, well, whether you believe that or not, I did warn you not to do this.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, that was a hard thing for her to grapple with. Let's talk about some of the classmates. Obviously, the two ones that really stand out is Kate and Neza.
Yeah.
Those are friend and foe. But even with Kate, the big thing was he never he's so logical, right? He's like, I don't know, call him the atheist of the book. He never believed in the gods, right, until it was.
I think Tay was a guy who just didn't drink the Kool-Aid. So I appreciate him in that way. Like, he was very aware of the world that he grew in. And he knew his royal status, but he also understood the struggles that Rin was going through. Like, he was just the person who just got it, and he didn't let that bring him down or really affect him in that way. He's like, you know what? Everything's bullshit. Sorry, I'm cursing, but he's that kind of person who's like, yeah, it is what it is. What can you do about it? And he didn't let it bother him in that way. So I appreciate that. Like, he understood and he was very aware of the world. And I loved that Rin needed a friend. And because when she first went to the school, you could tell, like, she was so lonely. She was so out of place, stuck out like a sore thumb. So to have an actual genuine confidant, I appreciated Kate in that sense.
Yeah, and not once did he sort of waver through that, because certainly it didn't help his reputation, so no. That's a bold choice to go after. And I did like how Neza kind of evolved throughout the book, that nemesis who ends up being somewhat of a nemesis to rival, I would say. I don't think they ever were like true friends.
No, but near the end, you like Neza kept getting injured. I was like, dude, man, how great of a fighter are you really? I was like, she kicked your ass at school, and now you're getting impaled and getting knocked out on the battlefield like twice. I was like, how great of a fighter are you really? But and I think it really, in that physical sense, in literal sense, is that like he had to get knocked down a few times to be humbled, and I think that's what happened to him. And hit that conversation where those two finally, where he finally realized, like, no, you were better than me, you always were. And that he had to take a bite of the humble pie. And I think once they finally understood that, and he acknowledged, they started finally like seeing each other as they could actually be good friends throughout this.
Yeah, one of the I'm curious to know. This is all speculative, and maybe I predict it could be answered in 2 and 3. But there was the mention of how quickly he recovered after Sinegard, right? And I was like, does he have some hints of shamanism within him? Like, what's going on here?
Oh yeah, I mean, or some people are just fast healers. I mean, and I think that they said it was a very, very clean sword, clean slice through. No vital organs were hit. So maybe just he's young, he heals quickly. But
He's that,
oh,
he's that Wolverine.
Yeah, basically. And sometimes people just do. But I like the fact that like it shows that he's not the best fighter. So the fact that he's still alive after all of this, I was like, all right, you're still here, you're still fighting. Good for you, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate him, but he was a fascinating character. The one for me that I was sad to see like come and go was the tutor. I thought, he's so, not that he's helpful, but like, he does get her out of the shit life that she was going to have, and he drives her to there, and then they say goodbye, and that's it.
Yeah. And like I like that because I think if it wasn't for the people that Rin had in her life to keep her going or to just get her started, she would not obviously be there where she was. Like she had a friend and an ally at like the most important parts of her life. The tutor helped her get to Sinegard, and then she had her. Then Jiang helped her during that, and now then when she left the school, it became Alton. So like her confidants and her allies kept switching throughout the process of the book. But I hope, I'd like to see him come back.
What's interesting as you talk about that, all of her like mentors, from one perspective, are all druggies.
Yeah,
because he was doing opium. That's how she got him on board. Her master was
with opium.
Yeah, her master was always high, and then all was high, most of the time towards the end. So it's very fascinating how that's a through line.
Right, and I think it just shows the environment that they are in, like how powerful opium can be, and also on the flip side, how destructive it can be, and the way that they used it, especially when it came to Alton's character, how he used it as a coping mechanism, but it first started off as a torturing mechanism. And so you see the different purposes of the opium throughout the book and the different uses of why it's such a through line.
Yeah, and that's the tough part, right? And obviously, in many ways, that could be quite relatable. Going on junior pandemic, and potentially with some people saying potential World War III. It's like you can understand some whether it's alcohol or other drugs. It's like, yeah, sometimes you just want to shut the voice up in the head.
Yeah, it becomes vices, and it becomes weapons of like just to keep your country going. Especially in this book, they mentioned that they were given, the country was given opium as basically a gift and a sign of peace. I'm like, Mm. It really depends on how you use it.
Yeah, and the other aspect too, that's tangential to all of this is kind of just how history is formed in all these places, right? Because when she goes to the academy, and within history class, right, she shoots up her hand like she knows the answers because she feels confident, and it's like, oh, that's what they teach the commoners as was history. Like that's not actual history, and so it's just the I don't know, call it the information. If you will. I thought that was a fascinating aspect to include.
Right. Or you see how different cultures are catered to the history that's unbiased opinion. Like I can't imagine well I do like you bring it up. It is war, but like World War II. And I'm just curious how the Germans teach their kids and teach their students and children what happened during the World War II. Like from their perspective, like it's from like any different country's perspective how they teach their children what really happened. And like yeah, people are gonna leave out the gruesome details because maybe they're ashamed of what they really did. It's it and so for Rin, of course, she didn't have that education, so she's learning as she's going, and she's gonna have gaps, educational gaps, because that wasn't provided to her. So I think I felt for her in that moment because that was just her just being a general student, just trying to learn.
Yeah, but that's the fascinating part. Even the history that they're being taught there, in many ways, also has some gaps and is speculative, right? Because certainly, just within strategy class or whatever it was, they're trying to figure out, okay, why was this measure taken? Because no one really knows. And certainly, like you look, Tirza, right, the leader of Spreely, no one knew why she did what she ultimately did,
Right.
and that, I mean, ultimately that was Rin's journey to figure that out. And the choice was simple. Like the cost was too great for that, where it wasn't for Rin.
Right. And the thing that we're always getting with book is that we're always hearing or seeing the outcome. We're not actually seeing the beginning decisions or what caused it. We're always seeing the aftermath.
Yeah.
And that's Rin's journey throughout this book. And she's trying to find the answers. She's trying to find out why things are the way they are and how they came to be, not just the result. And I like that because it now definitely set her up for the second and third book. Like now she has a journey, she has a purpose of what she's going to do now with her power.
Yeah, I mean,
Mission.
so yeah, where do you think it goes? Like obviously it's all speculative and could be very easily answered by like even just a quick Wikipedia read, but it's a very interesting journey to me because I don't, where she's left off here, my heart breaks for Rin, but I don't love her anymore. Like she is, for all intents and purposes, a villain.
Well, she is a completely different character than the Rin we first read from the page one. And again, it goes with the journey that she's not herself anymore. And I think we're near that part where is she too far gone now, or can she still be saved? Because it is so early on in this journey for her. So
What's interesting though, like when you say that, right, the beginning, because she always used pain as a motivation, right? When she was studying for that test, she would like physically abuse herself to stay up. So she always had that element of as a driving force.
Right, pain, but also again with the perspectives, like is she now going after the Empress out of revenge or justice? Depends on how you see it and how you look at it. And that's where I'm actually very, very curious to read the second and third book to see how she approaches it or what's the reasoning behind. There's a way to stop someone from what they're doing, but the reason behind it is a whole nother thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the way I understood the ending. It felt like not literally, like I'm not saying this as a negative, but like it felt like a villain mustache twirl of like, wait, so I'm in charge of the psych and they can do whatever I call them to do.
the god makes into me, like evil.
Yeah.
Haha.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting how you read it, because you see, again, different perspectives. Because when I read it and she was thinking it to herself, I saw it more as like she had to say it again to process that, like, oh, I am now in a position of power. Like she had to convince herself, like, oh, this is where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I saw it as like she was kind of like in denial, and now she had to like actually accept the fact that, like, oh, now I'm the person that everyone follows.
Interesting.
Dang.
There, look at that. Two completely perspectives on the ending.
Yeah.
Um, Interesting. What else?
That's why we're talking about this book.
Indeed, we've kind of touched upon a lot of it. I guess one of the things we haven't touched upon. So there's 64 gods, but really we only ever discuss one, which is the phoenix. And I just wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, we do get. I guess there's the god of wind, which is the Phelan, who's out and about doing God knows what.
Right.
Literally.
And there are different animals. Like one turns into an ape. One turns into some other type of creature. Like what was it? Like horse? There's a horsepower of some sort. Something like that.
I forget. Like again, because I mean, the fact that there were 64, but really only the phoenix is made heavily explicit as like the god.
Right, and I think like the phoenix was definitely highlighted more because it wasn't just one person; it was two people channeling the phoenix. So it was definitely at the forefront of everything. And I think just maybe with past culture of media and or what have you, we know Phoenix character. I kept thinking X-Men. Phoenix is like by far the most strongest character out of all the X-Men, but we know how destructive it can be, and we know just the metaphor of fire, that it can be life, but it can also be death at the same time. It's how you control it. It's such a beautiful, uncontrollable power, and how they kept relating that with the Phoenix, and how it's channeled through Alton in one way and how it's channeled through Rin in a different way. And the reason is how they call upon the power for the different purposes that they need. There are multiple ways for the Phoenix to act, and I liked seeing the different sides of it.
Yeah, and I think this is a but let me know what you think of this theory. Maybe the rest of the gods weren't as highlighted because, as her master says, like, things are out of balance, right? You need balance with the gods. And certainly if you're just going to be drawing upon the phoenix, then there's 63 other gods not being utilized, essentially. And that is very off balance.
Right. But also because we haven't really had highlights of the other gods. I think we really had to establish the Phoenix in this book for obvious reasons, but maybe they are highlighted more in the second and third. Maybe
I imagine so.
Yeah, I'd hope so. It's like the Phoenix can't be the only one working. There are 64 others, or like 63 others. Like we got to see them in action too. But I think it's for the power that they needed at that moment to take out an entire country. They needed the power of the Phoenix and not the power of the other gods, of which they can conjure up.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just so fascinating. Like, I think she does an amazing job of the world building. And I love how, like, she explained how all this came to be. But then there's the selfish part of me of like, where's my Greek history lesson version of this? Like, give me everything I need to know. It, like, is there a Zeus? Like, he's the king of the god? Like, what's going on here? Are they all equals? What?
Like, who's friends with who dislikes who?
Exactly. Like because there is that side of it. Like, it does feel like, the Greek or the Roman gods where like one's pissed off at another and they're just all, using humans as pawns. But then the Phoenix, of course, says that's not actually the case.
Well, definitely. It definitely takes upon the Greek mythology because, I mean, you have the freaking pantheon. I mean, like, they had a place where all the gods lived, just like Olympus, where all the Greek gods live. So, like, you can definitely tell where she pulled those references from. And I liked how that she established that there are just more than just the Phoenix. because that definitely opens the doors to seeing the powers of all the others.
Yeah.
And hopefully that they come into play, maybe for the other battles that they need.
I mean, you got the Dragon Republic, which I know is one of the republics, but I imagine there might be a dragon. Dragons have a lot to do in Chinese culture, so and then the third book is called Burning Gods. So I imagine that's another reference to the Phoenix, but could be something else. Who knows? Anything else that we haven't touched upon? I mean, I know we've kind of gone every which way, but I think for the most part, we did at least touch upon most of the important stuff.
Right. I really liked the characters and how they were established one way, and then they basically, you can say they kind of had a second chance or a second revisit when they came back into Rin's life, serving different purposes or acting differently. I appreciate that, because a lot of people only come into your life once and they serve their purpose. But then when we saw Neza come back, when we saw Venka come back, like these people are coming back into our lives in completely different ways. And you can think Rin be like, hold her grudges against them. But because of the war, there's like no time to hold past, indifferences towards them. And she's more willing to be forgiving, which was kind of surprising, but I also enjoyed that. So that makes me think that like there's still humanity in her. Right now she's angry. We know she's an impulsive person. So maybe her declaration of war against the Empress is just another moment of just her being angry.
Yeah. To borrow from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, anger. Anger clouds the mind. Turn inward. It is unconquerable enemy.
Yeah.
So we shall see.
Exactly.
Well, this book is highly, highly received well. It has won many, many awards. It was a finalist for the Nebula Locus Award, the World Fantasy, the British Fantasy. And listen, for a first-time debut author, which is redundant, of course, but listen, if this was my first novel, I'd be psyched.
I know this is a great novel. I'm going to pass this book on to my mom.
Yeah. Which is a good point. If anybody, I'm going to do this with my books. If anybody out there wants my copy of the book, comment down below or hit me up on social media at Phil Svitek, and I will be giving away, I don't have many copies to give. I only have the one, but I will be giving away the various books that I actually own. But speaking of, so for the month of April, we will be doing The Invisible Woman.
Yes. Which
is about World War II. So we're doing a theme here of like war. And this is less speculative fiction and more like, actual historical events. So, so there's that. And so The Invisible Woman by Erica Robuck.
Yes.
That is, so you got a month to read it, or forever, whatever you want. Also, speaking of my giveaways, I have the Diamond Age, so I figured I'd offer that up to people by Neil Stevenson. So if you want it, let me know.
I have so many books. If I open my cabinet, they would all just tumble out right now. So
awesome. Well,
I'll let you guys know.
Final thoughts as we wrap out and give our stuff.
Such an easy read. I love the characters, and like she does a great job of establishing characters and establishing a world. And now finishing it, I was like, oh crap, now I gotta read the second and third. But that's what you want to do. That is the work of a good author and writer, is that you want more. And she definitely left me wanting more or now, like, because we got a lot of answers, but we didn't get the whole picture of everything, because now we know that there's like a whole nother mission that Rin is now on with this newfound power. We're like, what is she gonna do with it? I want to see. So I want to see. So it's a
Yeah,
really,
me too.
really good read.
Me too. I'm, and obviously the only reason we're not is because that would dedicate 3 months to just one author, and we want to try to get to as many different books as we can. And I mean, even within a 1 year, we're only covering 12 books, so we're doing the best we can.
We're busy people.
But yeah, so we have that. Go ahead, shout out all the exciting stuff that you're doing, what you want people to go see in terms of what you've been up to, all that jazz.
Yeah, I'm just doing a lot of work. I work for City of Beverly Hills, so I'm just doing that, being a video producer in and of itself, reading when I can, martial arts when I can. I do train in Krav Maga. So and you can see me post some fun stuff about that too. But you can follow me everywhere at Serafini TV, Serafini TV.
There you go. And I'm at Phil Svitek. And yeah, pretty simple. So all that stuff is linked to below as well. So that way you can get to it and don't have to remember it if you didn't jot it down. But thank you guys so much for joining us. And hopefully you'll come back for The Invisible Woman. But if you want to skip them, if you want to go to the one we do after that, whatever that may be, because we don't quite know, join us for the books that you do read. So we're here.
We're going to try to switch it up with a lot of different genres, a lot of different types of authors. We're not just like stuck to one particular thing.
Absolutely. We're going to try to go beyond just the classics.
Yes, absolutely.
Bye.